Good morning. My name is Patrick Littlefield. I'm running for Congress here in the 3rd District to renew and restore opportunity for our middle and working classes by improving economic opportunity, reducing the uncertainty and cost of healthcare, and by improving access to education and training. I am a job creator, I am a healthcare innovator, and I'm a proven public servant at the national level. My wife and I have lived in the district for 23 years. We've raised 4 sons here, and we understand the value of hard work and sticking together through the good times and the tough times. What I bring to the table that is unique is a combination of extensive experience in the private sector as a business person and as a public servant at a national level in Washington, D.C. Throughout my career, I've focused on healthcare, improving how it's delivered and making it more efficient, and I've done that both in the private sector and in the public sector. In addition, I've had a chance to get legislation done on behalf of veterans. I led an effort to improve the appeals process for over 450,000 veterans. The result of that effort is a new law which is being implemented today and is having an impact on thousands of veterans. As a healthcare expert, I believe that there is much that we can do to make the system more productive and efficient. I believe that we should have universal access to healthcare and that should be delivered through a single-payer model. But the bottom line is that I think I bring something really unique to this race, which is dual experience in both the private sector and the public sector. I've learned how to turn the gears in Washington. I've wrestled with the dragon, and while I have not won every battle, I have won plenty of them. And with your support, I'd like to go to Washington and make those gears turn on behalf of the people of this district. Thank you.
I'd like to open the latest editorial board with 3rd Congressional District candidates. With us today is Patrick Littlefield. Patrick, thank you for coming in. Just to go over a couple of the ground rules, we'll have about an hour of a question and answer period with the Sun staffers. We'll give you about a minute or so to introduce yourself. So I relinquish the floor to you, Mr. Littlefield. Have at it. Tell us why you're running for Congress in the 3rd Congressional District.
All right, Chris, thanks. Pleasure to be here. So good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Littlefield, and I'm running for Congress because I wish to restore and renew opportunity for the working and middle classes here in the 3rd District by improving economic opportunity, by reducing the uncertainty and cost of health care, and by improving access to education and training. I'm a job creator, I'm a healthcare innovator, and I'm a proven public servant at the national level. And I'd like to bring my experience to bear on the issues that we face today for the 3rd District here. I've lived in the district for 23 years. My wife and I raised 4 sons here and survived to tell the tale. We understand the value of hard work and sticking together during the good times and the tough times. So today I hope I get a chance to talk about the business that I've built here in the district, a company called Wavemark. I also want to talk about the work that I've done at the national level in the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington. So it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to putting everything I have into this race and to performing for the people of this district.
Thank you. Patrick, tell us about the business, your business that you formed and what that's all about.
Sure. In 2003, I started a business called Wavemark.
Could you repeat that?
The business's name is Wavemark.
Wavemark.
Right. Wavemark operates in the healthcare sector, tracking medical devices, high dollar and consumable. And when we started, it was really an Internet of Things business, a little bit ahead of the Internet of Things. So we struggled for a few years to make that business work. But we did push through, and today that business employs almost 300 people. In good jobs that I say lean towards the future. So I'm incredibly proud of that. And that's part of the experience that I want to bring to bear for the district, is my experience as a business creator, as an innovator, and as a job creator.
And where is that business based?
The business is based in Concord, and it is now a subsidiary of Cardinal Health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it is also probably the leading kind of business in its sector, which is this digital tracking of medical devices.
Since you mentioned medical devices, why don't we just stick with healthcare at this point? Chris has had some great questions on universal healthcare and the medical device. Chris, why don't you questions now, since we're
curious? I think you've spoken about it at debates previously, but just for everyone here, talk a little bit about your views on how healthcare should proceed. Are you in favor of a single-payer system, or do you think that we should continue to operate under the Affordable Care Act with some tweaks?
Right. So I spent about the last 15 years of my career working in the healthcare industry, typically focused on creating and then deploying new ways to deliver care, to improve access, to improve quality, to make the system more efficient. So during that period, I've come to the conclusion that universal access to healthcare is a core public good. Everyone needs to have access to public healthcare. However, the cost of healthcare is extravagantly expensive, and its costs continue to spiral upwards. So, in order to kind of contain costs, but at the same time make sure that we're improving and maintaining our quality, I favor a single-payer model. Now, that is going to need to be a gradual shift, but I think a single-payer model is the only model that's going to allow us to squeeze out the administrative costs, which are an enormous part of the health system. And it will provide a counterweight to what I call the medical industrial complex, which today controls the healthcare system and is what is driving the cost ever upward.
What in particular, who in particular is driving those health costs? Do you think it's a rigged system?
Absolutely. The system continues to look after its own interests at every level. So there is no single player that you can point to and say it's their fault or it's their fault. Whether you look at kind of hospitals, where essentially the model has been to increase costs and then find ways to bill for it. Whether you look at the device and the pharmaceutical industries who pursue a model of kind of rebranding and reproductizing, incremental improvements to products to keep their costs up there. It's loaded in the system. And as you know, as I indicated earlier, I'm a business person, so I look at this and say the healthcare system does not operate the way an open market should, where competition would drive down prices. But the bottom line is that any change in the system that we have today tends to drive up costs. And as a consequence, it is consuming more dollars out of individual pocketbooks, out of our public pocketbooks, and it's competing with dollars that, in my view, need to be focused at the public level on things like education and training.
I've never really understood why hospitals are nonprofits when they don't pay their executives like nonprofits, and for all the efficiencies that they say they do, prices never go down, and they lack transparency in prices. Now, those are three things I put on the table, but would changing their classification out of nonprofits, where they pay taxes like every other business like yours, change the system in any way to favor the consumer?
So we have a system that includes both nonprofit and for-profit hospitals. As you know.
Most community hospitals are
right.
nonprofit.
So I think it's possible that changing their tax status might help, but what you see is that the for-profit hospitals are just as kind of aggressive in terms of their pricing strategies as the nonprofits. The behaviors are slightly different since they can't pay out a profit, but the behavior in aggregate is the same. But you brought up something that's important to me, which is this notion of transparency. I think if we are going to get the healthcare system to perform in a more kind of open and competitive way, we need law which will require transparency of the entire system. And I sometimes ask people, so do you know where the dollar that you spend on healthcare goes? And nobody does. None of us know. It's completely obfuscated. So that's one of the things that I would like to do, if I'm fortunate enough to get to Washington, is I would propose law, I call it the Healthcare Transparency Act, which requires complete openness in terms of the transactional underpinnings of our healthcare system so we can see where the dollars are actually going.
I just got an interesting question here. In 2003, when you launched your business, okay, you were not paying the medical device tax. Okay, it didn't come into effect until 2010 with the ACA.
Yes.
Okay, how did that affect you, your business, and just how did it affect you and your business, and why did it take so long? I mean, it's still in there, but just tell me, how did it affect your business?
Right.
And when were you opposed to it when it was first put in that 2010 law?
No, I supported it.
Okay, why?
But because I think that the device industry can afford it.
But why is medical device tax any different from a new computer tax? I mean,
right.
Steve Jobs wasn't taxed on any new innovation
right.
that he created, so why go after medical device taxes?
The computer industry was a much more open, competitive marketplace, and what happened was, and we saw the cost of computers come down. And I forget what it's
Good point.
the price to performance ratio kept continuing. This was Moore's law. You're going to get more every year. We've had the opposite effect in the device industry, and it's I think an example of how, in a sense, the regulations. It's not a fair and open marketplace. That it's controlled by regulation. Pricing is obscured. The industry typically has agreements with its hospitals not to disclose its pricing. But what's happening is that is an anti-competitive behavior that, in my view, needs to change. That particular tax had no impact on us, on my business. And I could give you more information on the business, but that was around the time where we really began to gain traction. And was part just the maturity of the technology, our position as a business. But that particular tax had no impact on us.
Oh, good. Speaking of a fair and open marketplace, your business is in Concord.
Correct. And by the way, I am no longer an owner of the business. We sold it to Cardinal Health. So
Okay.
I am proud of it as its father.
Okay. Well, Concord,
But like many good children, they grow up to go out and earn their own
When did that
living.
sale take place?
2013.
Concord is home to one of the few remaining community hospitals. If you looked at the statistics, about 10 years ago, there were upwards of 70 community hospitals in the state of Massachusetts.
Right.
Now I believe it's half that. Lowell General has gotten bigger. Concord still exists as a freestanding community hospital.
You're talking
Leahy
about
has had-
Emerson?
Emerson, I'm sorry,
Yes.
yes. Leahy has made some affiliations, yet Partners just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So how do you assess the healthcare market in this very district that you want to represent?
Right. So the healthcare market here and the hospital market has been subject to a lot of consolidation in recent years. And consolidation doesn't typically help the consumer because what it does is it aggregates market power with a smaller and smaller number of providers. So in that sense, I think what you're seeing is Partners is getting stronger and stronger and more influential in the marketplace. And I think that let's put it this way, I don't think that is serving consumers financially well. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the quality of healthcare delivered by Partners. I also think that we as a society and Partners as a part of that can find ways to deliver that healthcare more economically with less redundancy and testing and so on and so forth.
But they have no incentive to do that because they're basically they only game in town.
Yeah, and I would concur. I think that is a problem. Over consolidation in the marketplace is going to tilt the balance of power in favor of the large healthcare entities.
So if you go to Washington as the congressman from this district,
Yes.
Looking, whether you serve 1 term or 4 terms and stuff, what is the major thing in healthcare that you would say that would have the most dramatic impact on lowering costs that you would push for?
Right. I think we need to move to a single payer model because a single payer model is the only thing that is going to give, in a sense, us as buyers the leverage that we need relative to this vast medical sector. So it's a question of scale. I'd like to see, I think that would give us the power to do some national rate setting. And I give you an example of how a single payer model worked well in Japan. And it's with respect to MRI devices. The government essentially, as a single payer, said, we can't pay $1,000 for an MRI. It's too much. So they said to the physicians, we're only going to pay $150 for the MRI. So the physicians said, holy cow, we got a problem here. And they went to industry and said, make us a device that will allow us to do an MRI at $150. So in this case, what that did is it harnessed the private sector ingenuity to produce a lower cost mechanism. So what happens is Japan actually does more MRIs than we do in the US, but it does it at a lower cost. So I would argue that's a place where essentially the public sector used its weight appropriately to direct the energy of the marketplace to productive activity. So we don't need a fancier MRI that's going to cost $2,000. We probably need a simpler one that can be used more regularly and in a more targeted way to produce the clinical outcomes that we all want.
Good. Any more healthcare questions?
Yeah, we got to move on.
Yeah, we've got several other topics.
One of the questions, Patrick, we've asked everybody, and I'll sort of use Jim's phraseology, is Congressman Littlefield, you're in the room with the president when it comes to, the Dreamers, and he offers you Dreamers for the wall. Where are you? Yes or no?
So I think I'm going to have to say no to that. But the first thing I'm going to say is, holy cow, when did the wall, which I think is a $1 billion boondoggle, which is not going to achieve the goal that he says he thinks it's going to achieve, when did that become equivalent to 1 million human beings? They're just utterly unequal. So, and I think the American people know and understand that. So I think I think it's a bad hypothesis, and I would seek to decouple that as quickly as I could.
So what is the answer then on immigration and the current status of 11 million people here?
Are you talking about the undocumented?
Undocumented.
Right. If you look at that 11 million, it turns out that 2/3 of those folks have been here for 10 years or more. That they're doing jobs. They're raising families. They're contributing as taxpayers. So I think we need to provide those folks with a pathway to citizenship. Now, I'm not, if somebody is a bad actor and, they're engaged in criminal activities, we need to get them out. So I'm going to make a clear distinction between the people who I think are contributing members of our society and those folks who are not. And I'm going to step back and say, listen, immigration has been the lifeblood of this country since its inception. And we've gone through wave after wave of immigration. And every time it's produced tensions and it's produced uneasiness. But every time we've figured out how to embrace and assimilate the newcomers, and they have made this country a richer and better place. So I think, I support immigration as an ongoing and healthy part of our national identity. Let us be a beacon to the people around the world who are seeking opportunity and who have the energy to come in and create new businesses and add to our culture and deepen our cultural life. So I want to be really clear about that. At the same time, I say we need better border security. And we need to put immigration on a better managed footing. So I had a conversation with the mayor of Marlborough, and his concern was not that we have immigration, but that he doesn't know who's here in his community. And that's a problem, and we need to address that. So I'm not in favor of just, kind of opening the gates and letting anybody who wants to come in. We need a better managed process, and that includes improved kind of security and controls over who's able to come into the country.
Specifically, what kind of border security measures are we talking about?
So my inclination is to say that we should use increased technology methodologies to ensure that we can see and track who's coming across the borders, across the physical space. We need good background checks kind of at the point of entry and so on and so forth. So I think that the border security needs to advance as we are advancing technologically and from a cybersecurity and information security perspective. I actually see it as an opportunity. How do we do this better? Let's not go out and put bricks and mortar up. Let's use the technologies that we've got to find better ways to secure our borders.
What about sanctuary cities?
So I generally think that the decision around how to handle local issues should stay local. So I support the efforts that are going on here in the State House. And one of the candidates here is one of the sponsors of that bill. And my understanding is that, and I want to commend them for this, that what they did is they put an initial draft on the table. They got some pushback. They went out and talked to law enforcement officers locally and have added that feedback to the bill. And it's a better bill as a result of it. But the bottom line is, local police have a lot on their plate. They don't need to have federal mandates that are going to require them to spend vast parts of their day on stop and frisk measures. And I think that decision should remain locally based in the community.
On that bill that you were referring to, the writers of that bill initially wanted to hold suspects, I believe it was for 6 hours, right? And then the governor came out and said he preferred 12. What do you think is an appropriate amount of time?
My sense, I guess I'm going to line up with the writers of the bill here and say, let's stick with 6. That's not something I've studied closely, and I could give you a better informed answer if I spent a little more time on it. I'll be candid, I'm not sure what the governor thinks he's going to achieve with 13 that we haven't already achieved with 6. And my understanding is that the state cannot hold people if they've satisfied the legal dimensions with respect to that detention. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to put the state in a position of having to act illegally, holding someone illegally in order to meet an arbitrary 13-hour requirement.
Why do people who are in this country illegally get more benefit of the doubt from the law than citizens who actually live here and were born here? And I mean, that's what this law seems to do. I mean, you're giving more benefit of the doubt to someone who could be a criminal, as opposed to someone who was born here and commits the same crime. I mean, you know, it just seems unreasonable to a lot of people in this community, and that's what makes this third district so important: the diversity of opinions and ideologies.
Yes.
But it seems that, well, to me anyway, but you're the candidate, that we're bending over backwards to really take care of a constituency that has really came here illegally or overstayed their visas. There were 265 people naturalized in Fitchburg yesterday. We have a front page story in the paper, the Sentinel Enterprise. Some of those people might resent the fact that they had to go through 6 years of waiting, establishing their residency, getting a green card. Some of them were even sponsored for jobs. And that someone could just walk across the border and then stay here, and now they want to bring their family here from overseas, chain migration, wherever this came from. And yet we have no law. I mean, even what Democrats are proposing, you know, some people say enough is enough, but they want it to be nebulous. And it seems like your policy wants to stay that way too. You talk about border security, and yet, we'll be doing asylums in another 10 or 15 years when another 10 or 15 million people come across the border. So what is Patrick Littlefield's immigration law? What does it say? After we let these 11 million people file for residence, give them the pathway. Okay, let's do that. Let's give them citizenship, all of them. So where do we start from zero after that? The Littlefield law of immigration. Where do we go from here?
Right. So I think that we are in the unfortunate position of having to deal with a series of defects that have occurred for years. And they are essentially a problem because the Congress has not done its job of putting a coherent immigration policy in place. So I hear you. There are some inequities and imbalances there, but we're where we are, and I want to do the right thing with respect to where we are, acknowledging that there may be some imbalances in that. The heart of this, I think, is getting immigration right at the first place. And so what that means is tightening up the borders so we don't accrue large numbers of people who are here on an illegal basis. It means dealing with things like the temporary protected status issue, which is a defect of Congress kicking the can down the road. They didn't do their job. These are all side trips that they took instead of actually putting immigration on a solid footing. So my inclination would be to put it on a solid footing. Let's have clear targets for who can come in each category. Let's manage and monitor to that, and let's make sure that we don't get in these kind of deficit positions where we have competing, what I'll call our human and moral imperatives, which I think are important to us as a nation, and the fact that we've got people here on different bases. So if I were in Congress, I would be pushing hard to put a robust immigration plan that I think we can both enforce and manage and make sure that we don't get into this position in the future.
Sounds too reasonable for Congress.
Speaking of
I'd like to talk about that.
earlier this week, a Democrat won a race for Congress in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And that Democrat, Conor Lamb, had the backing of Seth Moulton from
Yes.
Massachusetts. Moulton has been trying to get people to run for Congress that crafted like him, and he actually thinks that Nancy Pelosi should be replaced as the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives. Do you share those same values of Seth Moulton, or do you see yourself siding with someone like Nancy Pelosi if you're elected and the Democrats take that Congress?
Well, I'd like to think that I'm an independent here, and neither Nancy Pelosi nor a Seth Moulton Democrat. I will say that there's a lot of young leadership in Congress, like Seth and Joe Kennedy here in Massachusetts, and I love the fact that we've got this young folks here with energy, and we're trying to push forward and kind of create a new, kind of new leadership cadre. This is good and healthy. And by the way, there's always going to be these tensions between kind of folks who are pushing up and the folks who are kind of the incumbents. With respect to Nancy Pelosi, I want to recognize that I think Nancy has been a strong asset for the party for many years. With respect to whether or not I think we need new leadership, that's a question I'd like to address when I have a choice as to who would replace her. So I'm not going to make a categorical she's got to go. On the other hand, I do love this new energy. I'm delighted to have the young blood. And there comes a time in every kind of institutional life when you need new blood in the leadership. Maybe we're there. But that sort of generational turnover.
Well, you're not quite ready to say definitively that it's time for a change.
No.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let me look at who's running. Let's make a decision then.
Chris?
Patrick, one of the awesome responsibilities of congressmen is to vote on a declaration of war. And now we've been involved in a war for 16 years, so to speak, and still paying. You go to Congress. What are your thoughts? I think even the existing president would like to get out of that fiasco. Although he's claiming victory over the Taliban.
You're referring to Afghanistan.
I mean Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan. Yeah, the Taliban.
I know.
So where do you stand on that? Would you like to see? Do we keep this security operation going? How do we relieve ourselves of this burden, or is it just too important to the security of our national interest that we must remain there indefinitely until I really don't know? But your thoughts?
Right. So I've seen 3 presidents live through this cycle, whether it was George W. Bush, who initiated the conflicts post 9/11, Barack Obama, who voted against the war, as I recall, as a senator, and was kind of his general thrust was that he was opposed to it, come in and at times, allocate more troops. And then now we've got Donald Trump, who is, I believe, took the Democrats to task for their conduct of the war. Every president who's come in has taken a look at this and said, yikes, this is a tough issue, and they're weighing really important national and global security issues relative to the cost and blood and treasure and of our continued participation. I'd like to see us be out of there. I think we have paid dearly, and it's not clear to me, to begin, what we've achieved. There's a big topic about that, but so
would you endorse talks with the Taliban, which is being raised right now? They're trying to end this war between the Afghani government and the Taliban, and supposedly the U.S. is trying to push, even though they won't come out and publicly say it, but they're trying to get the sides.
Right. So I'm going to go back to kind of your first question. So the power to go to war belongs with the Congress and should remain there. So I'm a firm believer that that's a congressional duty. I think that would make for a more robust process than kind of where we've seen kind of executive fiat, for example. With respect to talks with the Taliban, I'm generally in favor of having conversations. Now, there's a lot of detail around how you do it, when you do it, where you do it, and with whom. But if you don't have dialogue, you don't have a way of moving forward. And one thing that is clear is that these are not just military conflicts, they're social conflicts. And war, as Mr. Clausewitz said, is an extension of social policy. But I think the notion that we're going to achieve a purely military victory here is a fiction. And that the only way to engage in and kind of resolve these is to have dialogues with the people who are part of the kind of fabric of those nations.
Tom?
I know you worked for at least 10 years at the VA in Washington. Five, okay. If you could explain just a little bit about what you did there, and my first question is, that off of that is, how broken is this healthcare system? Because we have heard stories about the things that have gone on in the Bedford VA with lack of leadership. We've had issues with patients under their care dying. Other lack of management issues. I know that there's been a new director appointed there in the last week. How broken is it?
Yeah. Thanks. Glad you asked these questions. So let me go back to your opening question. So I was asked by the Obama administration to go to D.C. in late 2012, and to help stand up and operate something called the Center for Innovation at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The Obama administration was interested in plugging private sector kind of entrepreneurial DNA into what is the nation's largest civilian agency at about 350,000 employees. And this was an honor and a pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed the work at VA. And just to be really kind of upfront about it, I have great fondness for the VA. The VA is filled with people who are truly dedicated to the mission of taking care of veterans and doing so in a robust, high-quality way. But it is also like one of my children. I know its weaknesses and its defects. I love it anyway. I believe that VA is actually a national asset that is poorly understood.
So you worked with David Shelton, who's the...
That is correct.
Should he be replaced?
That's not my call. That's the president's call.
Well, I understand that, but do you think the president, he supposedly, his head is on the block, he's next to go.
Right.
You spoke about him in very complimentary terms.
Correct.
Do you think that it would be in the best, let me rephrase the question, would it be in the best interest of the VA to retain him as the secretary? Or the administrator,
right.
Whatever his title is.
Right. I think that the secretary is trying to do the right thing, which is to, in the face of a constituency which would really like to privatize VA, push veterans out to the public sector. I think that the Secretary is trying to preserve the VA system so that it can continue to specialize in the specific needs of veterans. So, for example, whether it's traumatic brain injury or the mental health issues associated with either combat experience or military experience. So I think he's trying to do the right thing there. I think he has clearly goofed in a couple of areas, clearly with the trip to Europe. There were some issues.
Well, he's not the only cabinet secretary. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's correct. But I think if he, in terms of one of the things you have to consider was, well, who would come in? And if whoever would come in would unwind VA, I think that would be a bad move for veterans and for the nation. So
it sounds like you would retain him. I mean, let's cut to the point.
Yeah, my belief is that he is trying to do the right thing and that, yes, we should continue to retain him in that job.
Have you been following the stories of the Bedford VA?
Yes.
Now, in most accountability models, the few scant ones that they have, Bedford VA comes out pretty good, okay, as far as service to the patients. And yet, just 3 or 4 years ago, there's a major comprehensive study when a lot of veterans were either dying in the care of the VA or they were neglected and stuff. This started in the Midwest and out West. And then it became apparent that we had to pour more money into the VA system, which was done to attract doctors and to get more supplies, okay? And yet you were a businessman, you grew your company, because you probably set some accountability measures and goals. And yet it seems that even to this day, some of those goals that were originally discussed in Congress and stuff have not been implemented. You could not tell one hospital from the other in the VA system, and yet we've got a hospital here that there were people who were stealing from the hospital. They weren't even fired by the administrator. They've had 3 administrators. The first search for a new administrator, they couldn't even find anyone. who fit the mold. Now they're taking the assistant deputy, okay, who was in charge. Why wasn't she in the first round of
At
the
the
search?
Bedford facility.
Yeah. Okay. Why wasn't she in the first round? That was going. So it leads me to say probably what you alluded to earlier, that either there's no incentive to get better people, or there's a bureaucracy there that is so embedded and so entrenched in a culture, okay, just like in Washington, that they don't want to change. Now, you were there for 5 years. Does that culture exist?
Yes. So, and one of the
And how do you move it?
Right. So, forgive me, this is going to sound a little bit wonkish. So I'm going to ask for the wonkish.
30 seconds. 30
One-
seconds.
one-
Okay, as long as you take the same amount of time as I asked my question.
I was gonna say, was there a question in there?
Well, there was. It was a broad.
Right. One of the big challenges is the HR system. And what it does, it is very difficult to move talent to task in a timely way. So as a business person, you always want to make sure that you got the right people on the right job at the right time, and you need to respond quickly to an environment that's changing around you. So the HR system in the government was constructed in the 40s and 50s. It's an industrial model which treats people as cogs in a vast machine, which, by the way, tends to disincent them from exerting the energy and initiative that you want to see. So one of the things that I think is a little appreciated is how important it would be to re-engineer the HR system to make sure that institutions like the VA can get the right talent to the right place at the right time. There are people who want to do this, but a lot of that system drives out the initiative of the people who are there.
Yeah, how do we change?
I'll pause because I could go on for an hour on
Okay,
this.
yeah, all right.
So could we-
We'll move on. But it's, well, you bring that business, some people say Congress needs more business type people, others say that well, look what we've got in the White House. But anyway, the mindset of accountability seems to be lost in some areas of government. But moving on,
Let's let Chris ask a question.
if he has one, does he have
Actually,
one?
could I jump one point there? So the business world and the world of public service are indeed different. So it took me probably 2 years to figure out, how to navigate this federal system. It was completely the opposite of the business world. So I think that's something that I bring uniquely to this race, is that I understand and know and love what I'll call the dynamism of the marketplace. But I also have worked in and know what you can and what needs to be done within this vast entity called the federal sector.
Well, you said originally in your opening that you're a job creator.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you obviously did. You had a good product. Okay, you developed it, and you grew the revenues so you could hire more people. So taking that to government, where does your talents come in? How would you do anything different with jobs programs or cutting taxes or whatever to spur this economic development? What have you seen in your experience that you could utilize if you go to Washington?
So how would I use public policy to ensure that we have robust economic development here in the 3rd District?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, economic development and a robust marketplace sits on a bunch of things. The root of it all is talent. So education and training for me are core investments that we need to make as a society. So I worry greatly about the level of debt that people who are trying to do post-secondary education are accruing. That's a huge damper. I think there are a bunch of ways to tackle that we could begin to kind of reduce that. So for example, I'm in favor of creating a program for national service that would allow people either to earn access to education in advance of college, or to kind of pay off their educational kind of debt through public service after college. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there are tremendous opportunities to engage the business community more in the educational environment, to more tightly couple learning with working. These are not separate things, that we go to school in part to figure out how to take our place productively in the workplace and society. And they're good examples of it. One of the things, by the way, in terms of public-private partnerships that I love here is the Lowell plan at the Lowell Development Development Corporation. I think that is a brilliant program that has knit together academia, public policy, and the business community in a way that's producing new businesses rooted here in Lowell, driving the economy, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of dials and levers that you can turn.
Quick question here. A couple of your opponents in this race have called for free community college and even free college, at the university level. Do you see any scenario in which that's feasible?
So free is a funny word, right? Free to whom?
Well, free to the student.
Free to the student, but the point is
someone's got to pay.
There's a bill to be paid.
Right.
So I think the question is, if we want to make this critical resource available, how do we do it? And I'll go back to some things I was trying to earlier. That's where I'd like to see as a national program, as one of the elements for providing a funding mechanism. I'd like to see us reinvent how we're looking at education. So, for example, I'd like to do a prize that says, show me a way to do, kind of a liberal arts degree at half the cost. And I mean, the British did this when they were trying to figure out navigation around the globe. That's something that we in the public sector can do to incent the private sector to look at things differently. So, again, I think that let's look at how we kind of make available these resources were critical, but taking advantage of our capacity to create new models. And by the way, the knowledge of the world is on the internet, folks. What are we doing with this? And I've looked at some of the numbers. The increase in the number of administrators in our higher education institutions has been astounding. I think it was something like a 10x increase in administrators from the mid-1970s to the year 2010. So we've got to look at that business model as well. Both healthcare and education, in my view, are extremely inefficient businesses.
This is my last question, then I'll relinquish the floor. We're talking about business and business productivity. The tax cut that was recently implemented, was that a good idea or a bad idea? How do you feel about that?
Terrible. This is bait and switch.
I heard someone on the radio today that said like 5 million people have received bonuses. How's that terrible?
That's terrible because they took a small immediate refund, but those are going to go away, and they are going to pay the bill for a $1.5 trillion addition to our national debt. Who do you think is going to pay that?
Well, free to whom, right?
Free to whom, right. So, no, I think it's terrible. And I'm not averse to putting money in people's, back in people's hands. But I think that the notion that this is good for the middle class is a complete illusion. One of the first things I'd like to do when I get to DC is unwind that thing.
I just got $2,000 more. I went to, no, really. And my tax preparer, he's a staunch Democrat, and he's been doing my taxes for years. And he said, because my wife's retired, I made the same exact earned income as I did the year before. And when he showed me what I was getting back, I said, Joe, I'm going to go to jail. He says, no, this was the Trump tax cut. He says, you're getting $2,000 more, and you're not going to have to pay into Massachusetts for the first time in 5 years. I couldn't believe it.
There's a question coming.
So, how can it be bad if the middle class gets something back? And I know that you said it's going to expire after 6 or 7 years, which if you're in Congress, I know you'll vote for my tax cut, okay? Or I hope you would, all right? So the middle class gets something, and all of a sudden, Democrats are against it, because there might be someone up there who's making $800,000 or $1 million who's getting something out of it. Well, I'm just concerned about what I'm getting. I'm not concerned about that. And no one seems to be concerned about the debt that's been exploding going back from Delano Roosevelt. Okay, so another 1.5 million. Who cares? No one cares in Congress to this point. Why would they care going forward?
Well, because they're business people. So I'm thrilled that you got the $2,000 rebate. That's terrific. And I would like to see more money in the pockets of working people. But at the same time, you got that $2,000. Charles Koch got $26 million, and his $26 million is going to keep going. And I just don't think that's right. One of the big problems in this country is that too much money is concentrated at the very top, and the value that all of us in this country are producing is all getting captured by the top 1% and the top 10%. It needs to be spread more equitably across the people who are producing it. And to me, that's the working and middle class.
So you'll increase mine to 4,000.
Okay, I'm taking the floor away from you. Okay. Chris Lisinski, do you have any further questions?
What do you think that, I think all the Democrats in the race have made a point of calling for gun reform, especially in the past few weeks. What do you think that should look like? What specific actions do you think Congress should take, while also acknowledging the Second Amendment?
Right. So I think we need to have comprehensive background checks. A weapon should not change hands without there being a background check. Two, I think we need to get military-grade assault weapons out of the mix.
By that you mean a ban?
Yes, I think we should go back to, I think it was the 1994 ban on assault weapons. The AR-15s are not necessary for the protection of home and property. I'd like to see more focus on mental health. I think we ought to think about training programs associated with deadly weapons. So when I got my driver's license, I did 6 months of training with an automobile. Why? Because it's a deadly weapon. So I'd like to see more emphasis on weapons training for those who have them. So in general, so those are kind of the primary kind of emphases that I'd like to focus on.
Now, how likely do you think any of those are in Congress? How likely to pass?
I think it's an uphill battle. I'll be candid. I think that one of the issues here is that the Second Amendment has been interpreted in ways that I don't think are serving us well. So I think, I know that this is a long haul, but this is the aspirational goal. I think we ought to take a look at the Second Amendment and reinterpreting what a well-regulated militia means.
I know this is a new question because of we haven't asked the other candidates because it just broke yesterday. But I'm going to ask you, one of the Democrat candidates for governor came out yesterday with a proposal to ban all assault rifle manufacturing in Massachusetts. We have one big company out in the western part of the state that does that. Is that a way to attack this issue that we have with gun violence, to say we should, Massachusetts, ban the manufacture of these guns in a company in Massachusetts?
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There will be manufacturers throughout the United States, and I don't see why we should give up what could be an appropriate and productive economic activity. I think it's not going to gain us anything, and it's going to cost us jobs.
Tom, anything further?
I have two very quick questions tying into the previous topics. One, should the government incent smart gun technology?
Okay. Say more. When you say smart gun, what's
in other words, palm print. You buy a gun, your palm print is on there. You're the only one that can fire it.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd be
because they had done that. There was some work in the '90s on it, and then the industry.
I think the Attorney General, wasn't Maura Healey originally?
It was originally in the '90s.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a yes.
Okay. Other thing is, asked everybody about a $15 minimum wage. Where do you stand on that?
That's a good question.
So I think we need to walk the minimum wage up. So one of the things that I hear about when I talk to people here in the district is that there are plenty of people who are working a lot of hours, they're making minimum wage, and they can't put it together. You're working 50, 60 hours a week and you can't make it work. That just doesn't feel right to me. So I think we need to walk it up. On the other hand, I recognize that is going to create, kind of burdens for small businesses. We need to be thoughtful about our small business community as well. And that's why I prefer to do that in a gradual way.
Patrick, when you were running your business, where did you recruit your talent from? And I mean, were they from colleges, other companies, and what type of level? And my point to get to is, there's been a talk that employers in Massachusetts keep saying they don't have the qualified workforce to do some of these jobs. Did you ever have that problem? And where did you get your talent from?
Right. So most of the talent was local in the sense that it was from what I'll call the greater Massachusetts area. The business was founded in Boxborough, Littleton, now Concord. So our talent came from the area in general.
Were these scientists? Were they engineers? Were they...
It was a combination. Some were healthcare folks, some were supply chain folks, some were technology folks. It was a blend. But we had, the recruiting is a challenge. I mean, definitely. I mean, you're always looking for the very best, and it's a blend of both talent, commitment, their inclination, the way in which they work with other people in the workplace. But what I hear from my friends, and I have been in the public sector for the last 5 years, is that there is indeed a scarcity of the kind of high-end technical talent that they believe they need to pursue kind of cutting-edge businesses that are going to make this area really powerful and productive. So I believe that it is an issue, that there is a gap between demand and supply.
Is it that the colleges aren't turning out in Massachusetts enough of these people, or are they graduating and because of issues in Massachusetts like housing and high costs, they're moving out of the area to go to places where they can work less expensively and still get pretty good salary? Is that happening at all?
Right. Probably somewhat, but I think you raise a really interesting issue, which is that you've got a lot of people for whom the cost of living in the Boston is very high. I actually think this is an opportunity for the 3rd District, is that our cost of living is lower, and that we should be focusing on being attractive to the sort of high-end talent that is going to drive these businesses. And then going back to your question, if the school's not producing enough, or are they leaving? My sense is that we need to double down on focusing on things like STEM education, and then connecting the people who are coming out of the educational system to our businesses early. I would do this through internships, apprenticeships, etc. But I think we do need to double down on STEM education.
One last question. We've had 3 nor'easters now, and we're probably going to get another. I don't know if it has any impact on what's happening with climate and globally, but should the United States get back involved with the Paris climate accords? Or did that bother you at all that this president doesn't want us to be sign on with that? Or
that's a good question. I wish we'd been asking that.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that the climate change is real, and that it is a global issue. It's not a local issue, and therefore we need to be at the table with the global community to be crafting these solutions. We're not going to get everything we want, but if we are not at the table, we're losing our chance to lead and to drive in a direction that we think is productive for us. So, and I'm very concerned about the climate. And because we are dumping more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it's a vicious cycle. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So yes, we got to be at the table.
In your campaigning throughout the district, what are 2 things that have surprised you most about either what people have said to you or about what you have seen? 2 things that really resonate.
Right. The minimum wage issue is the one that really got me at the gut level. And so that's one of them. The other one is, and this is a recurrent theme, is the need for what I call a robust transportation infrastructure. People can't get to work. So you've got good jobs, but if you can't get there, the whole economy is set back because you can't put the dots together. So I think that there is an opportunity to develop a regional transportation plan. As a matter of fact, if I'm fortunate enough to serve, I would like to convene a district-wide session with the municipal leaders, the county leaders, to see if we can develop a regional transportation plan that includes both air travel, rail travel, road travel, to make sure that as we enter the 21st century, that people can get where they need to go to do the jobs that are going to be available in this incredibly robust district.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So should the government emphasize construction of new roads and bridges, or should it invest in a reliable public transportation system such as trains and buses, which is the way Europe does it?
Right. I think you need a blend,
Yeah.
and this is why you need to pull together a regional plan. I'll be candid, I had conversations with folks in Gardner who said, well, so if you extend the Fitchburg line out to Gardner, that's not going to solve any problems. And if you ask why not, well, it's about infrequency, it's about lack of parking, it's about unreliability. So there's a rail component in there, but that's got to be blended into all the other mechanisms. So that's why I think you can't take anything in isolation.